create as much as instances or as much as entity of the same type, okay, of the same type can be created, and for that we can write the class definition. Okay, that much we have seen. Okay, now coming to the very first feature of the class, I hope everyone understood what is object and what is class. Okay, if you have any query, let me know immediately. Okay, so going further, that class supports or it provides one more, feature, that is encapsulation. Okay, if you remember, I started with our requirement that we want um, some kind of way, okay, or framework in which we want to define the data, okay, and we we also want to define methods, okay,
Okay, which
and
is
that can be provided single unit, and that unit is called class. Okay, so when classes are defined, uh, programmer, okay, and that will be or hidden inside the class. Okay, of course we need to specify some access specifier. Using access specifier, we can say that, oh, this data members can be private. These methods can be that day I just mentioned that methods are always methods are public, but if so if you define these data members as a private, okay, then these data members will be accessible only from within the class and not from outside the class. And whichever things, either data member or member function, you will define as a public, encapsulation or data hiding. Okay, now coming to the next but it is not necessary. Okay, all the methods are public, so this public methods can be invoked. Okay, this can be invoked non-member method or non-member function. Okay, and of course they know the functionality, otherwise how they will invoke it, right? How they will invoke it. So what are the parameters need to be passed and everything, okay, that they know. Any other query? Okay, so let us move to the next topic now. So in this way you can hide your implementation. Okay, you can just give the prototype or signature of the member method for any non-member method or another team which can make use of that. Okay, now coming to the instance method and instance variable. Okay, so right now I will not talk much about the instance methods, but instance variable. Okay, I will talk about the instance variable. Now, instance variable, if all of you remember that, I think okay, I will continue with that bank example. Okay, so assume that you have one, you have a, you defined a class with the name bank. Okay, which is having some data members. I'm not mentioning the data members. Okay, and member functions or member methods. Okay, now when I say in another method, in another function, either in the main or any other non-member function, if I, or inside the member function also, okay, if I instantiate an instance, okay, it is called creating an object, is nothing but instantiating an instance of that class. Okay, so assume that I will take v1 is one variable, v2 is one another variable. Okay, and mentioning yet v3 is another, v4 is another variable, data member, right? Whatever is there. So when I say bank v1, okay, so in memory, just the way you, whenever you define a variable, in the same way memory will be allocated and the object name, so this will be object. Okay, this will be the object of the type bank. Okay, and name of the object will be b1, and all the data members, okay, copy of all the data members v3 v4 will be there. Okay, now assume that again I will give the same example that somebody is having a mobile manufacturing company and they want to maintain a sequence number. Okay, sequence number. So that sequence number should be nothing but the, say, v1, okay, or id. See, this v1 is nothing but the id. Assume that v1 is nothing but id. Okay, so this is nothing but v1 is nothing but id, sequence id. Okay, or the serial number, you can say serial number. Okay, so v1 is used to store the to store the serial number of the product. Okay, because they want to keep a track that how many pieces of that mobile has been produced by that or manufactured by that company. Okay, so now this means that they need something which should be common amongst all the objects of that class. Okay, all the objects of the class. Let me create one more object of this class. Assume that there is one more object, say B2. This is B2. Okay. B2 will also have V1, V2, V3, V4. Okay. So I have created one more object of with the name B2. Okay, so again, the memory will be allocated for all the data members. Depending on the type of the memory, the number of bytes will be allocated to V1, V2, V3, V4. So you need to understand, all of you need to understand that the data members of B1 and B2 are completely different and they will occupy separate memory space. Okay, they will occupy separate memory space. Now, out of these four data members, V1 is storing the serial number of that produce, okay, of that piece of mobile. Assume that. So now, if in that case, if I required in that scenario, if I required to maintain a sequence number or the serial number, okay, then I am required to have one variable which will be common to all the objects, which will be common to all the objects of that class. Okay, in reference to the bank, I will say that I want to give a customer number, a sequential customer number. Okay, and that serial number, customer serial number, will be stored in a variable V1 in our case. Okay, in our case, it will be stored in a V1 data member. Okay, but after creating an object, who will convey that, okay, which sequence number it should take? Okay, assume that right now this is the 1. So here the value of V1 should be 1. Okay, here the value of V1 of B2 should be 2, and so on. But who will convey while creating this objects that now the value of V1 should be 2 or whatever it is, depending on how many this objects you have created. Okay, so what kind of feature I want is, I want that there should be one variable which should be common to objects all the objects of that class. Okay, so I can do that, and that is called static data member. That I can do with a static. So though I hope that everybody should take a note of this, that class variable, it is called class variable. So the class variable is defined using the static data member. Okay, so whenever you define the any variable as a static, okay, so here it will occupy some different space. It will occupy some different space. So assume that in addition to this, all V1, V2, I defined one V0. Okay, V0, which is static data member. Static int V0. Okay, now this V0 will be only one, and it will be shared. It will be shared by all the instances, okay, or all the objects of the class bank. All of you are with me? This variable is called class variable. Okay, this variable is called class variable. Any doubt? Any query? I'm going to discuss this in detail again. Okay, don't worry about this, but just I'm telling that what is a class variable. Is this clear? Okay, so let us go with, so irrespective of the number of objects you will be creating of the type bank, this V1 will be having only one copy. V1 will, V0. V0 will have only one copy. And now whenever the object B1 will be created, it will increment the content of V0 by 1. Okay, so by 1 it will be incrementing its value, and that incremented value will be assigned to V1. Okay, whenever I am creating an object B2 after V1, again the value of V0 will be incremented and that will be copied into V1. Okay, so this variable is called class variable. This variable is called class variable, and class variables are defined with the keyword static. Okay, static keyword was introduced to you, might be in your CP course or might be in a data structure. So all of you knows that across all the iterations of a particular method, okay, across all the iterations of a particular method, that static data will be always there. Okay, rest of the data will be on the stack, but local variables will be on. But if any one of the local variable is static, it will be defined and it will be allocated space separately. Okay, I will come to that point also where it is stored on memory. Okay, similarly, there can be a class methods. There can be class methods, and those class methods can also be defined using the keyword static. Okay, I'm going to discuss it in detail. Don't worry about that. I'm here just introducing this terms. Okay. Okay, so try to remember that there are two concepts: class method and class variables. Okay, next characteristic is inheritance. Okay, next characteristic is inheritance. As I mentioned that you might be having some class, okay, some class. Here it will be class name, and here say V1, V2, V3, V4 are the 4 data members. Okay, here F1, F2, F3, F4 might be 4 member methods. Okay, now in future, or while designing the application only, you might have, it might be the case that you want, or let us assume that in future one requirement came up that not only 4 attributes but 5th or 6th attribute need to be introduced in the class. So instead of copying and pasting this class, okay, instead of copying and pasting this class, a new class is inherited. Okay, new class will be inherited. This is the derived class name. This is a base class name, for example. I am writing B for this. This is a derived class name. Okay, and I will add only the new feature which I want to add, or new attributes which I want to. Of course, you have added new attributes, so it might be the case that you need few more member methods also. Okay, so when I will instantiate an instance or create an object of the derived class, okay, of the derived class, so memory will have that object. Say if I say D1 is my object, okay, D1 is my object. Okay, let me simplify. The name of the class is base. Here the name of the class is derived. Okay, so if in somewhere in the program, if I say derive D1, okay, so memory will be allocated for all the attributes, and it will have not only V1, V2, V3, V4, but it will also have V5 and V6, the newly added. Okay, if we create an instance or an object of only base class, okay, only on the base class, it will have only 4 attributes: V1, V2, V3, V4. Okay, so this means that the derived class, which is derived from the base class, will inherit all the data members and member methods of the base class. So this base class is nothing but a parent class, and the derived class is called child class. Okay, so this is also one beautiful feature of the object oriented methodology. Okay, now assume that before deriving a derived class, you might be having one non-member function, say print. Non-member function print. Okay, and that print might be say void print, and that print might be accepting an object of the base class. I'm giving the base picture. Okay, and assume that some code. Okay, fine. Now you have derived class from the base class. Okay, and the same method need to be executed for the derived class also, for the derived class objects also. Okay, so now here I have created an object of the base class B1. So in some another function, I can say print B1. Okay, absolutely fine. Here I need pointer of the base class I. But in addition to that, it will also accept a pointer of the derived class also. This is also correct as the, okay. So this is a substitution principle. Again, we are going to discuss it in very depth because it is very important. I'm just introducing you right now that which are the features throughout this course, we will be discussing more or less all these concepts which I am mentioning today in today's class, right? Fine. So this, so this is a polymorphic substitution. This is that our no object-oriented methodology or programming languages is developed in such a way that the function which accept the base class pointer will also accept an address of the derived class pointer also. Okay, now this is one polymorphism. Another polymorphism is, now see, again coming back to this base class and derived class. If you see in the base class, there are only 4 attributes. There are only 4 attributes. Okay, and assume that F4 is nothing but the output function, which is printing the value of V1, V2, V3, V4. So the functionality of F4 is nothing but outputting or printing all the data members. All the data members. Okay, now I expanded the definition of that base class by deriving the new class derive, and in that derived class, I added these 2 data members. Okay, these 2 data members. Okay, now when the programmer might have designed the base class, he was not aware that in future somebody will extend this class, will inherit or derive a new class, and will add 2 more data members to that. Okay, so if you look at the code of F4, it might be that case that F4 was outputting, the function F4 was outputting the value of V1, V2, V3, V4. But now in the derived class, you wanted to print all the data members. Okay, so in that case, I will give again, I will redefine that function f4 here. I will redefine this function f4 in the derived class. Okay, this is again, oh, it is a overloading. Fine, but now if you look at this print, okay, assume that inside the print, it might be invoking, this say b f4. Okay, now if is the you no problem. Okay, it will if you invoke this by passing the address of and this will invoke in response, this will invoke this will invoke this f4. Okay, body, I mean, it will execute the definition of f4. Okay, but just now I said that the base class pointer can also accept an address of the derived class. Address of the derived class. Okay, now here d1 is an object, or the address d1 is an object of the derived class which is having these two additional data members. Okay, now if that is the case, then that is if this pointer b is pointing to the derived class, in that case, okay, in that case, it should invoke the modified f4 and not the old one, not the base class f4. It should invoke the appropriate member method of a class. Is it visible? I'm just reducing it. Is it visible completely now? Or size became very small? Anyone can respond.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now there are two definitions of f4. Okay, one in the base class and another is in the derived class. Okay, and based on the argument, the actual arguments you have passed, depend on that, it should invoke the appropriate definition, or it should execute the appropriate definition of f4, because there are two definitions of f4. Okay, one in the base class and another. So the if the b, okay, if the formal argument, of the print method, non-member method, is pointing to an object of the base class, then it should invoke the definition which I have given with a blue color. Okay, which I have this. Okay, but if it is pointing to the derived class, then it should invoke that method which I have shown with the arrow with a green color. Is this clear to all? Anybody can respond, right? Anyone? The silence, shall I take it as nobody has understood? Yes. CRs, can you reply?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, uh, are you people with me, or I'm going little fast?
No, ma'am, it is fine.
It is fine. Okay, fine. Okay, so this means that based on the actual argument value, that this statement, okay, this statement should invoke appropriate this should invoke appropriate method definition. Okay, and this will not happen at a compile time, right? This will not happen at compile time. This will happen only at a runtime. So actually, the pure polymorphism, okay, pure polymorphism is nothing but dynamic linking, which I have explained just now. Okay, and it will take place at runtime and not at compile time, because we don't know which actual argument will be passed to the that function print. Okay, so this is in a true sense it is a polymorphism. In some of the resources, if you refer your internet, you will find that function overloading is also polymorphism. No, it is not a correct. Function overloading is a function overloading, right? It's one feature that you can write multiple functions, either a non-member function or the member methods of any class, that is more than one method with the same name, but the argument list will be different, either the number of arguments or the type of the argument. Okay, but that is not at all a form of polymorphism. Okay, so those who rely on the resources available on the internet, right, they should take it carefully. I mean, any other query? Any other query? Okay, so majorly all features I have mentioned you about the object-oriented methodology of programming paradigm, right? We started with abstraction, encapsulation, data hiding. I mentioned that how you can hide the implementation. Okay, you can just give the handler to the person who wants to make use of that. Okay, like a sort example. Then I mentioned that there can be there are instance method and instance variable. So each these are the instance variable. Okay, v1, v2, v3, v4. Okay, but as I mentioned here, that sometime there might be a need that there should be one common variable or attribute which should be shared by all the instances, all the objects of the class, that is called class variable. Similarly, there can be a class method. Then I talked about the inheritance. Okay, and then I talk about the polymorphism also. Is this clear? So today I will just introduce you about the C language, C++ language, and then again I will, in next class we will start actual, I think there is some question in the chat box. Let me see that. Like, we know what printf, etc. do, but not how they, yeah. Gaurav, you correctly said that the way I mean, or all of us make use of scanf, printf, and many such library functions. Okay, but their codes are also available. But here, if you want to hide your implementation, you can. Okay, but of course, you are correct. You are correct that we should know only the prototype of that method to use that method wherever required, because we know the functionality of that method. Okay, so coming to the, again, a little bit, I will go backward. Coming to the programming languages, we know when C was introduced, it was introduced like one of the languages which is close to machine. Okay, so if you want to write some application which where you need to do some jugglery with the hardware, okay, at that system level, Okay, so what you need is you need a vehicle for the programmer to specify the action to be carried out at a machine level. Okay, now another category of the languages can be close to the problem to be solved. Okay, close to the problem to be solved. If that is the case, then it needs the set of concepts for the programmer to use when thinking about what can be done. Okay, this is very important while thinking about what can be done. Okay, so all aspects of machines are handled simply or efficiently in a way that is reasonably obvious to the programmer if the language is like that, especially assembly level language. Okay, and if you want a programming language which should be close to the problem to be solved, then what we need is the facilities that we added, okay, or that are added to the C language to create C++, okay, such as classes, function, argument checking, constructor, and destructor. I will be discussing what is constructor and destructor soon. Okay, so a very brief introduction about the C++. So C++ is based on both the idea that it should be, I mean, the language should be near to machine, and it should be also easy for the programmer to, to focus on what to do, and not how to do, what to do. Okay, so if you look at the machine level, then what is there? That direct mapping of the built-in operation and the type of hardware to provide efficient memory use and efficient low-level operation can be done with a C++ language. At the same time, affordable and flexible abstraction mechanism with the help of class definition. Okay, this is provided. I mean, a user can make use of this to support various uses, just like the built-in data type. Okay. Brief history. Structure at AT&T Bell Lab extended C with similar like classes in the early 1980s, and that time they used to call it the C with classes. Okay, that new language, uh, by adding the features which they thought that it will be useful for the programmer, and similar was already into existence, so they added similar kind of features to C, and they called that language as a C with classes. Okay, then they completely designed he completely designed the C++ language, which is nothing but a successor, we can say, with for the C with classes. Okay, it was then done by Stutzap in 1986. Okay, and the version 2 was introduced in 1989. Okay, that is they kept on revising and improvising the uh, design of C++ compiler. Okay, so remember the three principles on which C++ language is designed. Okay, very first was very obvious, that is the use of classes. Okay, but while introducing this concept, object oriented concept in C to design C++, they don't want to compromise on execution speed and also on the memory. Okay, so for the same functionality, if I write a program with conventional C language, and if I write the program using class in C++, then there should not be much difference in terms of efficiency, whether it is a computing time or a memory. Okay, it should be same. So they don't, the Strassburg don't want to compromise on that. Okay, so that they don't want. Then, of course, C with classes or C++ is a successor of C with classes and C also. So that they wanted that C program should run as a subset of C++. Okay, that they sure. Can I tell you why they or most of the programming language designer think of giving this compatibility? Anyone?
It will be easier to learn C++ then.
No. Other than the commercial benefits, practical benefits? I do agree.
It will be
This
easier
is-
to adapt with new language, like studying new language, learning it.
that is true. That is true. Okay, but some another commercial aspect. Anybody?
The compilers for C were already written. We just have to modify it to support classes rather than writing the whole compiler again.
Okay. Anything else? From industry point of view, think about from the industry point of view. Software development industry point of view. Or those, I mean, see, when C++ was introduced, it achieved its own high popular it was very okay. Till back, the C was very popular. So those organizations their application using C, they will new language overnight, right? It is very difficult. So to make C++ popular, or no, or we can say affordable, or more attracting, or no, all possible things should be there. So if you give this feature that okay, whatever the application you have, which might have been developed in C, the same can run under the C++. All of you are with me? Because nobody would like to switch to the new language overnight. It will take few years. But till then, those who were already having their application which was developed in C, then either they might be, I mean, they could have been reluctant to adopt the C++ language. Okay, but they make it subset so that if somebody wants to switch to the new language, whatever the existing modules they were having, they might execute as a subset of the new one. Okay, from commercial point of view, this is one. Yeah, very correct. Very correct. I was supposed to say that is backward compatibility. Okay, somebody, Ojas, I think mentioned in the chat. Yeah, so that is for the backward compatibility. Very correct. Okay. And the last point which I mention is that no runtime inefficiency they wanted. This means that they introduced the class, okay, the way built-in data type can be handled, the same way they want that the programmer should be able to handle the class object. Okay, same kind of efficiency, same kind of treatment. So they want to incorporate such kind of thing at compiler level also. Okay, they want to treat object just like a built-in data type. Is that clear? Any query? Okay, now onward, I expect all of you to take down the regular notes during the class itself. Okay, now I will start with each feature in detail. Now for initial few classes, the programming vehicle will be C++. Okay, and then I will introduce you Java. Okay, but in between, we will again take one tutorial. I want feedback from through CR also. Is there any need to schedule one more tutorial for C++? If it is, then we will take a call on this. And on similar line, I will request Soumya to take a tutorial for Java also. Okay, so CRs, kindly coordinate and you can put in your group and let me know. So that's all for today. As there is no query, I will end today's class over here. Thank you.